The first time I met him, I was already halfway out the door, ready to bail on what I thought was going to be just another awkward Tinder date. You know the drill. Nerves, overthinking, awkward small talk that makes you wonder why you bothered swiping right in the first place. But then, right before I stepped out, he said something that caught me completely off guard. He asked if I was comfortable. Not in a casual, hey, you good way, but like he actually wanted to know if I felt okay with the whole situation. And before I could even think about answering, he just didn't wait. He took the lead in a way that felt both reckless and oddly reassuring. Let me back up a bit. My name's Jamie, and I'm 28, living in this weird limbo between feeling like a grown-up and still figuring out what the hell I'm doing with my life. I work a decent job in marketing, spend way too much time binge-watching shows alone, and have a pretty tight circle of friends who all seem to have their shit together better than I do. Dating? Well, it's been a series of meh moments sprinkled with a few genuinely nice conversations, but nothing that really stuck. At least, that's what I thought before I met Mark. We matched on Tinder about a week before our date. His profile was refreshingly straightforward. No cheesy pickup lines, no photos with sunglasses indoors or holding a fish. Just a genuine smile, messy dark hair, and a caption that read, "Coffee addict and dog dad." Let's keep it simple. It sounded like the kind of guy the first could actually talk to without feeling like I was performing. We decided to meet at this little coffee shop downtown, a place that felt more like an indie bookstore than a cafe, with mismatched chairs and shelves full of worn-out novels. I got there early, naturally. I'm a habitual early arriver when it comes to dates, partly because of nerves, partly because I hate being late. I ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and watched people pass by, pretending to be calm but feeling the usual mix of excitement and dread. When Mark walked in, he looked exactly like his pictures, just more alive somehow. He had this easy confidence, the kind that doesn't scream, "Look at me," but just quietly makes you want to pay attention. He smiled at me immediately, and I felt my heart do this weird flip-flop thing I didn't expect. We talked about the usual stuff at first. Work, favorite movies, that weird thing where you try to find common ground in conversations that feel too scripted. But then I started to notice something different about him. He wasn't just listening, he was really listening. Like he cared about my answers, even the small stuff I thought didn't matter. At one point I fidgeted in my chair, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the noise and the people. That's when he looked up, caught my eye, and asked, "Hey, are you comfortable?" Simple question, but it carried this weight that stopped me for a second. Honestly, I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that all this, the noise, the crowd, the jitters, was too much. But before I could open my mouth, he reached across the table, grabbed my hand gently, and said, "Let's get out of here." No hesitation, no waiting for my approval, just a quiet confidence that made me realize maybe, just maybe, this night was going to be different. So yeah, that's where I was when I realized I was about to follow a stranger out of a crowded cafe into the unknown, and somehow felt a little braver for it. We stepped outside into the cool evening air, and honestly, I barely registered the noise from the busy street or the glow of the city lights. All I could focus on was the way his hand felt in mine. Warm, steady, like it belonged there. It was the kind of simple touch that somehow made the world shrink down to just the two of us. Mark didn't say much as we walked, just kept this calm rhythm, like he was leading me somewhere safe. I didn't ask where we were going. Part of me wanted to, but another part was just curious to see what he had in mind. Usually on a first date, I'm the one awkwardly trying to control the conversation or the plans. But with him, I felt like I could just relax and follow. After a couple of blocks, he stopped in front of a tiny record store that was closing up for the night. The windows were covered in posters and faded band stickers, and the smell of vinyl and old paper seemed to drift out every time someone opened the door. He looked at me with this almost shy grin and said, "Ever been in here? It's my favorite spot in the city, even if it's a little off the beaten path." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. "Nope, never heard of it." "Well, now you have." He pushed open the door gently, and we slipped inside just before the clerk flipped the "closed" sign. The store was like a time capsule. Dusty shelves packed with records and CDs, old concert posters on the walls, and a small corner with a beat-up sofa that looked like it had seen better days. Mark wandered over to a crate of vinyl and started flipping through them with this kind of reverence that made me realize how much these things meant to him. "Ever listened to vinyl before?" he asked, holding up a well-worn Beatles record. I shrugged. "I mean, yeah, but mostly my dad's collection. It's been years, though." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. There's something about it, right? Like you're not just hearing the music, you're experiencing it. The crackles, the imperfections, it's all part of the story. I found myself watching him more than the records, the way his fingers traced the edges of the sleeves, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about bands I barely knew. It was contagious, and suddenly my nerves felt like they'd melted away. He pulled out a stack of records and motioned to the old turntable in the corner. "Help me pick something?" We spent the next 10 minutes debating over classic rock versus indie, and he eventually settled on something I'd never heard before, a soft, smoky jazz album that felt like the perfect soundtrack for a night like this. As the needle dropped and the music started to fill the room, Mark motioned for me to take the sofa. I sat down, feeling the worn fabric under me, and he plopped down beside me with a satisfied grin. The silence between us was comfortable, like we didn't need to fill every moment with words. After a while, I found the courage to ask, "So, why did you ask if I was comfortable back there? I mean, it felt like you already knew the answer." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I guess I was just trying to check in. Sometimes people get caught up in what they think they want a date to be, instead of what they actually need. And I didn't want us to be stuck somewhere neither of us felt good." I nodded, impressed by how thoughtful he was. That's honestly kind of rare. Most people don't ask. They just assume. Maybe that's why I'm not most people, he said, his voice dropping a notch, more serious now. I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. I want to be real, even if it's messy. There was something incredibly honest in that moment, like he was peeling back layers I didn't expect to see so soon. It made me think about all the times I'd put on a front, pretending I was fine when I wasn't, especially around dates. "I'm glad you didn't wait for me to answer," I admitted quietly. Because honestly, I don't think I would have said yes. His gaze softened, and he reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Then I'm glad I didn't wait." We sat like that for a while, the music wrapping around us and the world outside the record store fading away. I could feel a connection growing, something real and unforced, and it scared me and thrilled me all at once. Eventually, Mark broke the silence. "Want to grab a drink somewhere a little quieter? I know a place with the best tool tales and zero background noise." I hesitated for a second, the usual inner voice telling me to be cautious. But looking at him, the genuine hope in his eyes, I knew this was a chance I didn't want to waste. "Yeah," I said, standing up and brushing the dust off my jeans. "Let's do that." As we stepped back out into the night, I felt a strange mix of excitement and calm. Like maybe this time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for once, I didn't feel the need to run. The bar Mark took me to was tucked away behind a nondescript door on a side street, a place I never would have noticed if I'd been walking by alone. Inside, it was dimly lit with a cozy vibe, old jazz records lining the shelves behind the bar, and a few small tables scattered around. The kind of place where you lean in close to hear each other talk without shouting over loud music. Exactly what I needed after the chaos of the coffee shop. Mark slid into the booth first, patting the seat beside him like an invitation. I sat down, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, like trying to figure out if this was real or just one of those fleeting moments that felt like it could be, but probably wouldn't last. But then he smiled, that easy, genuine smile, and suddenly it felt a little less scary. "What do you want?" he asked the bartender, giving me a chance to think. I glanced at the menu, which was mostly tool tales with names I didn't recognize but sounded fancy. "Surprise me," I said, because honestly I wanted to see what he'd pick. It felt like a small test. Would he know enough about me to choose something I'd like? Or was I just another guy on a date? He turned back to me, playful. Bold move. I like it. When the drinks arrived, a dark, smoky-looking tool tale for him, and something lighter and citrusy for me. I took a sip and immediately liked it. Not too sweet, Just enough bite to keep me awake, but smooth enough to sip slowly. We talked about everything and nothing, the usual getting to know each other stuff. But there was a softness underneath it all, like we were both careful not to rush, but also eager to peel back layers. I told him about my job, how sometimes it felt like I was just going through the motions, not really passionate about marketing, but stuck because it paid the bills. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get that," he said. "I work in graphic design, mostly freelance. It's creative, but unstable. Some days I love it, others I'm stressing about the next paycheck." It was the kind of honesty that made me want to lean in closer, the kind that's rare on first dates. Usually people stick to safe, curated versions of themselves. But Mark was different. He was real, and it made it easier to be real back. At some point, the conversation drifted to family. I told him about my parents, how they were supportive but didn't really get the whole dating guys thing. My dad's awkward attempts at acceptance, and my mom's subtle questions about when I'd settle down. Mark shared his own stories. His parents divorced when he was a kid. His dad was distant. His mom overprotective but well-meaning. We both laughed at some of the absurdities, but there was also this quiet weight beneath the jokes, like our pasts shaped parts of us we didn't always talk about. I realized he was the first person I'd met in a long time who didn't seem scared to go there. After a while, Mark reached across the table and gently took my hand again. The bar was quieter now, and the low hum of a piano playing somewhere in the background made everything feel like a scene from a movie I never wanted to end. "I'm really glad you trusted me tonight," he said, his voice soft but steady. I know it's not easy to let someone in. I squeezed his hand, feeling my heart race. "Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was comfortable at first, but you made it easy." He smiled that smile again, the one that made me feel like maybe I wasn't so messed up after all. That's all I ever want, to make things easier. The night stretched on, and neither of us wanted to be the first to say goodbye. We talked about favorite books, guilty pleasures, and the little things that made us who we are. I found myself leaning in closer, drawn to the way he listened, the way his eyes sparkled when he laughed. When it was finally time to leave, the air outside was crisp and cool, the city quieter than before. We walked side by side, neither rushing, just enjoying the moment. At a corner, he stopped and looked at me. "Do you want to walk me home?" "I promise I'm not a serial killer." I laughed, shaking my head. "Only if you promise the same." We ended up strolling through the quiet streets, talking about stupid things and sharing stories from our childhoods. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized how rare it was to find someone who made me feel seen, not judged. When we reached his apartment building, he turned to me with a nervous smile. "So, would you maybe want to see me again?" I felt my chest tighten with something like hope. "Yeah, I'd like that." He grinned, stepping closer and brushing a hand against my cheek. There was a moment, just a breath, where everything hung in the balance. Then he leaned in and kissed me softly, like he was trying to memorize the way I felt. It was gentle, unsure, and perfect. I walked away feeling like something had shifted inside me. A door that I hadn't even known was there was now open, and maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something that could last. And all because he didn't wait for me to be ready. He just asked. He just reached out, and somehow, that made all the difference. The days after that night felt like walking in a dream. I kept replaying everything. His easy smile, the way his hand fit in mine, even the quiet confidence in his voice when he asked if I was comfortable. It wasn't just the date itself. It was the way he saw me, like I mattered beyond just some guy he was trying to impress. We messaged almost nonstop, but not in that overwhelming, needy way. More like two people who actually wanted to learn about each other, without the usual surface-level nonsense. Mark shared playlists, random thoughts about work, and jokes that made me laugh out loud at my desk. I caught myself smiling at my phone more times than I could count. A few days later, he invited me over to his place for dinner. I said yes without hesitation, even though my usual self would have been freaking out about the unknown. But with Mark, unknown felt less intimidating. His apartment was small but cozy, filled with art prints, stacks of books, and a couple of plants that looked like they were surviving against the odds. He was in the kitchen when I got there, wearing a faded band tee and this look of concentration that made me want to crawl right into his world. Hey, he said, turning around with a smile that made me forget every nervous thought I'd had before. We cooked together. Okay, I mostly watched while he did the actual cooking, but I chopped some veggies and tried not to mess anything up. The kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, and the whole time, we talked about everything from our weirdest childhood memories to what we wanted out of life. At some point, he reached out and brushed a stray hair from my forehead, and I realized how natural it felt to be close to him. Not forced or staged, just easy. After dinner, we moved to the couch with a bottle of wine and a movie neither of us really paid attention to because we were too busy talking and stealing glances. I found myself opening up about things I'd never told anyone, not because I didn't trust people, but because I'd never found anyone worth it until now. I used to think I had to have everything figured out by now. I confessed quietly. A good job, a plan, a relationship. But honestly, I'm still figuring out what makes me happy. Mark nodded, eyes thoughtful. Same. I think I spent so long trying to fit into what people expected of me that I forgot what I actually wanted. That honesty created this invisible bridge between us, and when he leaned in to kiss me again, it felt like crossing over into something real and uncharted at the same time. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a rhythm that surprised me. We went on long walks, tried new coffee shops, and even made a spontaneous trip to the beach on a rare sunny weekend. Each time, the easy familiarity between us grew stronger, like we were building something that didn't feel rushed or forced. But it wasn't all perfect. There were moments when my insecurities crept in, worries about whether he'd really be interested in someone like me, or if I was moving too fast. And I could tell Mark had his own walls, things he hinted at but didn't fully share. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch him staring off into space with a faraway look that made me want to ask what was wrong, but also not push too hard. One night, after a quiet dinner, I finally broke the silence. "Hey, you okay? You seem somewhere else." He hesitated, then sighed. "It's nothing, really, just stuff from the past. Family drama, you know." I nodded, not wanting to pry, but wanting him to know I was there. "If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." He gave me a small, grateful smile and reached out to hold my hand. "Thanks. I might take you up on that someday." Those moments, when vulnerability peeked through the cracks, made everything feel even more real. We weren't just two people on a date. We were slowly joining our messy, imperfect lives together. Then came the day I met his dog, Max. Mark had mentioned him a few times, but I had never seen the little guy until that afternoon when I dropped by unannounced, hoping to catch him at home. Max was this scruffy, enthusiastic bundle of energy who immediately took a liking to me, jumping up and demanding belly rubs like we'd been best friends forever. Watching Mark interact with Max, the way his eyes softened, the gentle tone he used, showed me a different side of him. Tender, responsible, and capable of deep care. That day, as we sat on the floor with Max between us, Mark looked over and said, "I'm really glad you came by." "Me too," I said, smiling. "Max approves." He laughed, and suddenly the idea of a future with him didn't feel so scary anymore. It felt possible. But even with all the good moments, I knew we were still tiptoeing around some unspoken questions. How do we make this work in the long run? How do we face the past without letting it pull us apart? And maybe, most importantly, are we ready to be all in? I didn't have the answers, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out, together. A couple of weeks after that afternoon with Max, things felt like they were shifting in a way I wasn't quite ready for, but also secretly craving. Mark and I had fallen into this natural groove, spending evenings cooking, binge-watching shows, and occasionally just sitting in comfortable silence. We were close, but there was a quiet tension underneath it all, like we both knew something was coming, but neither wanted to be the first to say it. It was a Friday night when it finally hit me. I was at his place, sprawled on the couch with a half-empty bottle of wine between us, when Mark suddenly turned serious. I'd been distracted, scrolling through my phone when I noticed him looking at me like he had something to say but was weighing the words. "Jamie," he began, his voice low. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately." I looked up, heart suddenly pounding. "Yeah?" He shifted, running a hand through his hair. I don't want to rush anything, but I guess I want to be clear about where I'm at. I like you a lot, and I want to try, to be together. For real. For a second, I just stared, unsure if I'd heard him right. Then this wave of relief mixed with excitement washed over me. I want that too, I admitted, voice a little shaky. I've been scared of messing it up, but I want to try as well. It was like crossing a threshold. The tension dissolved, replaced by a warmth that spread through my chest. We leaned into each other, and the kiss we shared felt different this time. More certain, more full of promise. But as much as that moment felt perfect, the weeks that followed were anything but smooth. Life, as it tends to do, started piling up on both of us. Work deadlines, family obligations, and those old insecurities I'd been trying to ignore popped up like unwelcome surprises. One evening, after a long day at the office, I found myself curled up on Mark's couch, exhausted and frustrated. Mark was trying to cheer me up, suggesting we order pizza and watch a dumb comedy. But I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that I was failing somehow, that maybe I wasn't cut out for this. I don't know if I'm good at this, I confessed quietly, staring at the ceiling. At being in a relationship, or even just being happy. Mark sat beside me, his expression soft but serious. Hey, no one's perfect at this stuff. We're both figuring it out. But what if I mess it up? What if I'm not enough? He pulled me into a hug, and I felt that steady presence wrap around me like a shield. You're more than enough. And I'm not going anywhere. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was the kind of honesty that made the hard days easier to bear. Around that time, Mark invited me to meet some of his friends. I was nervous, mostly because I'm awkward meeting new people, but also because I wasn't sure how they'd react to us. The night was a small gathering at a local pub, casual and friendly. His friends were warm and easygoing, and they seemed to genuinely like me, which was a relief. One of his friends, Alex, pulled me aside at one point. You're good for him, he said with a knowing smile. Mark's been through some stuff, but you make him happy. That stuck with me. Because yeah, Mark had his baggage, and so did I. But maybe that's what made this feel real. Not perfect, but real. Still, there were moments when Mark's past crept in. One night, after a fight that blew up over something stupid, a miscommunication about plans, I caught a glimpse of the pain he usually kept hidden. I'm sorry, he said, voice tight. Sometimes it's hard to trust that people won't leave. I reached for his hand, reminding him gently, I'm not going anywhere. He looked at me, eyes glistening, and for a moment I saw the boy who'd been hurt and scared for so long. That night, we stayed up talking until the sun started to rise, sharing stories and fears we'd never voiced before. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Over time, those moments of vulnerability became the glue that held us together. We learned to navigate the messy, complicated parts of love, the doubts, the insecurities, the scars, while still holding on to the things that mattered most. One Saturday morning, we woke up to Max curled between us, snoring softly. Mark stretched and turned to me with a sleepy grin. You know, he said, I'm glad you didn't run the first night I asked if you were comfortable. I laughed, tracing circles on his arm. Neither did I. In that quiet moment, with the city waking up outside the window and a dog snoring beside us, I felt something settle deep inside me. This wasn't just a fling or a nice story to tell friends. It was real. Messy and imperfect and beautiful. And I was ready to see where it would take us. After that morning with Max snoring between us, things started to feel like they were settling into something deeper. Not the kind of deep you read about in movies where everyone suddenly knows they're forever, but the kind of steady, quiet connection that sneaks up on you when you're not looking. I was still me, awkward, prone to overthinking, but I found myself wanting to be better for him, for us. One evening, a couple of weeks later, Mark and I decided to try cooking dinner together again. We'd done it before, but this time I felt a little more confident, not just in the kitchen, but in the relationship too. We picked a recipe that was ambitious for two guys who barely knew how to use half the appliances in Mark's apartment, but we laughed through the chaos, chopping veggies unevenly and burning the garlic bread a little. While the oven was doing its thing, we sat on the floor with Max nestled between us, the playlist Mark had made for me humming softly in the background. I looked across at him, noticing the way the dim light caught the edges of his face, the way he was so focused on the chopping board that it made his whole expression soften. You know, I said, I never really thought I'd find someone who makes me feel this calm. He glanced up, a small smile tugging at his lips. Calm is underrated. We talked about the little things that made us tick, the weird habits, the things we used to be afraid of, the moments when we felt most alive. It was the kind of conversation that felt like laying bricks, building a foundation. Later, when we finally sat down to eat, the food was a little burnt, but it tasted like victory. I caught Mark stealing glances at me between bites, and I felt my cheeks heat up. "Jamie," he said suddenly, voice quieter than before. "I want to be honest with you about something." My heart skipped. "Okay, I haven't really talked about this much," he confessed. "But I've been through a rough breakup not too long before we met. It left me pretty guarded, and sometimes I catch myself pulling back even when I don't want to." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "Thank you for telling me. I get it. I've got my own baggage too, stuff I'm still trying to work through." He squeezed my hand gently. "That's exactly why I want us to take our time. I want this to be something we build, not just rush into because it feels good." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and affection. "Yeah, I'm on board with that. No need to rush anything." The next few days were a mix of small adventures and quiet moments. We went for brunch at a spot that had way too many pancakes on the menu, wandered through a local art gallery, and then spent hours on the couch binge-watching this cheesy sci-fi show we both secretly loved. One night, after we'd been laughing over the show's ridiculous plot twists, Mark suddenly got serious. "Jamie, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Where do you see this going?" I blinked. The question hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so caught up in the present, the easy conversations, the comfort of his hand in mine, that I hadn't really thought about the future. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to see where it takes us. I want to figure it out with you." He smiled softly. "That's fair. I'm scared too, but I think it's worth it." That honesty made me want to lean in closer, to tell him everything I was feeling but couldn't quite put into words. A few days later, Mark invited me to a family dinner. I was nervous. Meeting family always felt like a minefield, but I wanted to be there for him. His mom was warm, with a laugh that filled the room, and his little sister was this whirlwind of energy, who immediately challenged me to a board game. The way Mark relaxed around them, the way they teased and supported each other, gave me a glimpse into the life he came from. After dinner, when it was just Mark and me walking home, he stopped under a street lamp, looking a little hesitant. "Thanks for coming tonight. It means a lot." I smiled. "I'm glad I did. Your family's great." He looked at me for a long moment. "I want you to meet my dad next." "It's complicated, but I think it's time." I nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far we'd come, from a chance meeting in a crowded coffee shop to this point where I actually felt like I had someone to build with. It wasn't perfect. There were still fears and doubts, but there was also hope. And maybe that was enough for now. A few weeks after that family dinner, Mark invited me over again, but this time there was a different energy in the air, something quieter, more deliberate. We were sitting on his couch, Max curled up beside us, when he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn box. I looked up, heart beating a little faster than usual. "What's that?" He smiled, eyes soft but steady. "Nothing fancy, just something I've been holding on to for a while. I wanted you to have it." I opened the box to find a simple silver ring. Nothing flashy, just smooth and understated. It felt like the kind of thing that held stories, history, and hope all at once. "I know we're still figuring things out," he said, "but this is a way of saying I want to keep figuring it out, with you." I felt a lump in my throat, not because of grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but because of how real and honest it all felt. This wasn't about rushing into something perfect. It was about choosing each other, day after day, with all the flaws and fears and quiet moments in between. I reached out, sliding the ring onto my finger, and looked at him with a smile that matched the one he gave me. "Yeah, I want that too." In that room, with the soft glow of the lamp and Max snoring beside us, everything felt right. Not because it was flawless, but because it was ours. Messy, imperfect, and deeply ours. Later, as I walked home that night, I thought about how far I'd come. From the nerves of that first date to this quiet promise. It had been a journey full of surprises. And the best part? I wasn't walking it alone anymore. Sometimes love isn't about fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it's about a simple question, a steady hand, and the courage to keep choosing someone even when the path ahead isn't clear. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready.